Welcome to Keep It Local, a podcast of Local Media Association. My name is Ryan Welton, your host, and today I'm joined by Bridget Thoreson, an expert in all things journalism and careers. She's been doing a lot of research, and today, in this video, in this audio, we're going to talk about the state of careers in journalism. How are you doing, Bridget?
I'm great, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
So, MyCareerRiver.com, you're writing a book about this moment that journalists are in. I'm one of them included. I left the traditional newsroom to sort of do my own thing. But that journey hasn't really been charted before. And it seems like thousands of us journalists are taking this course all at once, and none of us really knows what path to go. What has your research shown you about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging moment for so many of us for so many reasons. The industry is absolutely roiling with uncertainty. It feels like things are very much out of our control when it comes to our careers, our career paths, and the market is very, very competitive. It's becoming increasingly difficult for people to understand how the skills that they've spent so much time developing can translate to future opportunities. But what my research has shown is that actually uncertainty itself can be a really valuable asset to you in your career as long as you have the strategies that you need to find your way forward. And so for mycareerriver.com, I've now talked with 160 professionals, not all journalists, but many journalists, about how they've faced moments of uncertainty in their careers. And I've found some really interesting through lines about the strategies that people find useful to address these challenges.
So, before we get into some of those findings, this notion of embracing uncertainty, is it as simple as just saying, okay, I'll embrace what's coming? The strategies you talk about, what exactly would those be?
I mean, I wish it was that simple. Now, I'm an oldest sister and recovering honors student, and for so long I thought like I just needed to check all the boxes and then, that would equal success, right? I didn't want to have to figure things out over again. I just thought I'll just do my best work and that should be enough. Um, but what's been really fascinating to hear, Ryan, is the more people I've talked to, they feel so alone during those moments of uncertainty. I think as journalists, we're trained to be the experts, right? We need to show up, we need to have our certainty. But there is real value as well in using that other great journalistic skill about being curious. And what happens is the more people I talk to who share their stories of these moments of uncertainty and how they use them to figure out what was next, the more people feel comfortable that, it's okay that they're in a moment of uncertainty themselves. I think more and more, especially with massive changes coming to the marketplace for all of us, and we can all name a number of them. It is going to be a skill not to run from these moments of uncertainty, but to figure out your way forward. So, three strategies really have come to the forefront here, and one of them is understanding that progress is dynamic. And what that means is that it's no longer necessarily about just moving up the masthead, right? It's no longer necessarily about getting, bigger and fancier job titles or moving up to bigger and bigger publishers. Much in the way, frankly, that my journalism advisor told me I should be seeking 20 years ago. He told me, don't go into journalism, which as a journalism major junior was pretty shattering to hear. There aren't any jobs. And he said, go to law school instead. Clearly, I ignored him, and I just decided not to take that advice. And I'm so thankful I did because I have been employed in journalism for the last 20 years now. I've worked for a lot of places that I wouldn't have necessarily expected, some places that didn't exist when I was in college, right? But it has been an incredibly rewarding journey. And what made it rewarding is recognizing those moments that, I don't necessarily want status right now. Maybe I want some stability. Maybe I need to take a step back. When I left the newsroom, to be perfectly honest with you, I had just had my first child, and my boss and I were doing the jobs that seven people had done when I started there between the two of us, right? Due to layoffs and the shrinking newsroom. That just wasn't sustainable for me, right? So I had to find my own way forward. So that first idea, I call them the navigation law. The first navigation law is this idea that understanding what progress means to you will change over time lets you really think about what makes sense for you to pursue in this moment. It really doesn't just have to be based on title, not even necessarily higher salary. Sometimes you can do more other places and you can take a real hard look at your finances and what you can afford and what's going to be worth it for you. The second strategy is really around this idea of uncertainty. It's the idea that discovery requires uncertainty. You truly cannot learn anything new unless you're coming from a place of not knowing. And to be honest, Ryan, this is probably the one that I have been challenged by the most, but it's also the one that I think offers us the greatest sense of comfort in these really frightening moments. One of the people I talked to, and this is all on the record, I put this in my newsletter recently. Sabrina Iglesias was laid off from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now, she was unemployed for 427 days when we talked. She had sent out 127 job applications, and like so many people, mostly she just got no response. She was entirely ghosted.
Mhm.
I think she heard back from something like 23 rejections. The rest were over 100 places just didn't respond to her.
Wow.
And in all that time, she landed one interview. And this is going to sound really familiar to anybody trying to find something in the job market today, right? I've heard as high as 1,600 applications for one job. Like it is very, very tough out there. But when we talked about it, when we used the Career River idea to apply to our search, I was like, just make a list of your must haves and nice to haves for this next job. And instead of searching by job titles, search by the solutions you can bring, right? And so look on, and this doesn't work on every job posting site, but you can search by keywords. And she found 5 opportunities. Ryan, 30 days later, she had a job offer from one of
Wow.
them,
Now, was there a
right?
particular platform she was using, or was it all of them and she was using those strategies?
Well, I tell you know, what's interesting is because I asked her, I was like, "What did you change? Did you update your resume? Were you using the advice to, like, treat applying like a full-time job and go to conferences?" She's like, "None of that. Like, I didn't change any of it. I was using, the keywords," and she listed a few specific keywords. It's funny, one of them was trust building, and she got a lot of banking jobs. So I'm not sure what platform specifically she was on, but she tried a few different keywords based on the work she really wanted to do, and that's what opened up those new opportunities. And so this whole idea around, uncertainty doesn't have to be so terrible and so frustrating and frightening for us as long as we recognize like this is a necessary part of the process toward figuring something out for myself, figuring out what my skills can translate for. That's what can open those new opportunities. And then the last sort of strategy that I've found is really important is thinking about how impact feeds an ecosystem. And by that, I mean, when you think about the entire vision for your career, your work by its nature is one of connection. I mean, as journalists, especially, like we are only like as effective as getting relevant information to people that will make a difference in their lives. Like that's what motivates us. And we all know it's such a small world, right? Like we are all so connected and the work that we do, no matter where you sit on a hierarchy, the influence is not limited just to the higher parts of the org chart. I say it as it's not where you sit, but what you stand for. And so when you start to think about your impact of your work, not just as sort of like the status of the organization you work for, but what it allows you to do, again, then that starts opening up some really interesting possibilities.
So, of all the strategies you talked about, including embracing the concepts of discovery as it relates to uncertainty, does this
Mhm.
also apply to journalists who have left a mainstream newsroom and want to go out on their own and start their own platform or their own newsletter or their own podcast, their own Substack?
Absolutely, and it takes an experimentation mindset. I'm doing this myself, right? MyCareerRiver.com, I started it almost 3 years ago now, honestly, just to give myself a weekly deadline, right? Like, I have to write this week as I work on the book, and it has been fascinating to me. I mean, I cannot believe in our line of work, I just get to go to people and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in what you're talking about. Can we talk about it?" And they say
Mhm.
yes, even when I have nothing behind me but my own name. And you probably have experienced this too.
You bet.
Um, but It's interesting. I talk to a lot of people who it's like they wanna put all their chips on the one big bet, and the one big bet is the 40 quote unquote hour a week job, the full-time job.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but that doesn't have to be what defines you professionally. And so a lot of people I spoke to who did transition in one way or another, um, did so by running little experiments and seeing if they were getting back what they put into it eventually. I interviewed Matt Keyser, who is the founder of WTF Just Happened Today, right? That went huge, like enormous audience. And he spoke really, honestly about that tension between, do I start my own thing? What can I learn from it? But I think as journalists, we actually undervalue how the skills we bring to our profession translate to business in terms of, doing research and getting accurate information. I don't know, maybe business reporters, but everybody else, like we have these skills, we just aren't necessarily applying them in the same way.
There is a hashtag used on LinkedIn, hire a journalist. And one of my connections is actually kind of the person who propagated that to begin with. And she's done
I
it.
love that.
Yeah, done a great job with it because yeah, journalism skills. I've long had a saying that I call it activate like a newsroom, that actually marketing departments, no matter what business you're in, could benefit by having a newsroom mindset and having a journalist sort of teach you about that, not only in terms of producing prolific content, but also about
Mm.
things like fact checking, ethics, double checking a quote, this or that. So, My Career River, and you've got a book coming out, but
Mhm.
you also have My Career River. Is this something that people can join? And if so, what is involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can get the free weekly newsletter. It comes out Monday mornings at mycareerriver.com. And that's the best place to connect because that's really where the community is able to hear what my latest research is showing, try out some exercises, learn about any upcoming opportunities for like a webinar or course or anything else, connect with me directly. And it's all designed to get us from this place where you feel like you're just really struggling. And I was there, right? I've been there, and that's the whole reason I started mycareerriver.com, to feeling like you're a navigator, right? And even when you're facing, I mean, it's the metaphor that keeps on giving, right? But like choppy waters, running the rapids, whatever you're facing at this moment, like understanding there's a process here and that other people have been, forgive me, in the same boat, you're able to find your way forward.
I happen to be a non-swimmer, so I'll find something on land there for the metaphor, but
That's fine.
I totally get what you're saying. So, let's pull out a crystal ball here. Do
Mm.
you see this 1600 to 1 ratio maintaining over time, or do you see eventually uh, folks, journalists, sort of giving up on the idea of 40 hours a week and uh, going the multiple income stream route and just piecing it together? And when does uncertainty become
Mm.
certainty? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I started looking into where this idea of linear career progress came from because that's what I was taught, right? That you would be able to steadily work your way up in a pretty predictable pathway. And I was really surprised to learn that the career ladder concept itself dates from the early 1800s. It's actually appeared, I believe, in the dictionary before Queen Victoria was crowned queen. So it's like
Wow.
predates the Victorian age, just to put that in context. And specifically, it was brought over from companies as a concept from the military. So you hear the
Mm.
expression rising up the ranks, right?
You bet. Chain of
Um,
command.
Chain of command. Yeah, there's so many factors here. And specifically for companies to incentivize their employees to behave in certain ways. And then you would get a promotion, right? If you serve the company well. But clearly, that time period was a much different time. Um, And really, one of the major shifts, I mean, there's so many. First of all, there weren't many people who looked like me in the workforce at the time. But one of the major shifts is this idea that, a company can realistically deliver on its promise that if you accomplish XYZ, then you will get this reward. Right. It's no longer the case that you're just going to join one place and work your way off up the ranks necessarily, retire with a gold watch after 40 or 50 years. Now it's the case is we're all having to scan the environment for shifts. And so I won't predict like what shape that work will take in the future, but what I am hearing a lot, I have an article out about this today, someone who calls this the reinvention economy. And we specifically talked about the pressures of this moment. This idea is AI coming for my job, right? And her solutions, which are so aligned with what journalists do, are all around getting curious and using your natural like human collaboration skills to find a way to translate your skills for the marketplace. And so if we can just accept that, and as she pointed out, like, this is a structural shift, this isn't a blip, right? This is reality. And what we have to do is get comfortable with this reality, let go of this old, outdated idea that everything's just going to unfold before us as we would expect, and get comfortable with the idea of using these moments of uncertainty to find our way forward.
Yeah, there are. This isn't different from what companies and corporations do. I think about, I believe. Let me make sure I don't get this incorrect. But Sprint, Sprint in Kansas City, weren't they like railroad to begin with?
Well, that's right. That's a great example.
Yeah, and so companies are having to reinvent themselves all the time to make sure that they're addressing the marketplace, that they're keeping, especially if they're a public company, making sure that profits for shareholders are as high as optimized, if you will. But for so I guess I'm encouraged by talking to you in that journalists who find themselves selves at this career moment, this career not a blip, this structural change in what their work is going to look like, whether they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or above. And I'm 55, so I feel like I have a good 15 years left here at least in terms of career. It doesn't mean we have to leave journalism.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the big shift really is not defining yourself in terms of your title, but in terms of your skills and recognizing that that can manifest in different ways. I run this exercise. I call it the cocktail party challenge, but like pick your networking event. Any event where someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, so what do you do?" Right? And what do we always say? I am
Right.
a reporter. I am this and that. We're literally like pointing to a rung on the ladder for them. And I say, okay, your challenge is when you're asked that question, can't use the phrase I am. You cannot say your job title. You cannot say your company name. And people are looking at me like, well, what am I supposed to say, Bridget? I say, instead, share how you help accomplish something, what that currently looks like, what you're exploring, right? And so, for me, for any of the many iterations that my career has taken, whether it was at the newsroom or working at journalism support organizations or doing consulting, like I just say, like, I connect people with the information they need to make decisions about their lives. I find those information gaps and then I bridge it. And that's how you can remember my name. I'm
Mhm.
literally Bridget. Um, and that can, you think about roles that use those skills, there's so many possibilities there, but there's also people who stay in their chosen fields, but they just find different ways to use their skills. And more, the people I talk to as I've been doing these interviews are saying we are not going to be defined by the titles we've held, but the skills that we are developing and our curiosity about how we can apply them in this moment. And so that's where I would just really encourage everyone to, and if you sign up for this newsletter, you get this map your career river exercise where you can see sort of like what progress has looked for you and what skills you've used. And just that continual curiosity about, well, what could I do with this now? Right.
Mhm.
And being willing to experiment and see what you get back. And that's all just data. But like, what could I do with these skills? I think that, Ryan, is why, even as like a 20-year-old, I had the confidence to just ignore my advisor's
Mhm.
recommendation to go to law school because I just thought there's gotta be a place though that will value someone who really cares about connecting people to information. There's got to be a place, and I've been fortunate enough to find many of those places where I could
I
use that skill.
And I think there are more and more opportunities than there ever have been before. But coincidentally, there are also infinitely more people wanting to fulfill those roles. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure and add a link to this survey, and of course, a place to subscribe to the newsletter in the YouTube description and in the podcast show notes for Keep It Local. But I want to ask you a final question, and I don't know if you were a fan of the AMC show Mad Men at all. But I'm watching it with my wife. I know how it ends. So I don't know if you watched it at all. But essentially, the whole thing, there are many layered parts, but it's largely Don Draper's quest to find himself as it
Mhm.
relates not only to his identity, but his career. And without
Mhm.
giving too much away, look, folks, you've had 11 years to watch this since it ended. So, but at the very, very end, he realizes, no, I was meant to be in advertising.
Hmm.
It was an epiphany.
Hmm.
He took a circuitous route, but he really, so for the people you're working with related to My Career River, what is their epiphany?
Hmm.
Is it a search for contentedness, for happiness, or just for survival?
I think it manifests in a lot of different ways, but it comes down to this idea of alignment. And so I caution people when they talk about chasing the dream job, because if you're not conscious of what you're being asked to give up to get something, it can turn out that it's not such a dream. And I've had people tell me as much. But when you're looking at this as constantly moving toward alignment, and it may not necessarily even be perfectly aligned, because that's the thing about how all of us are navigating. We have constraints on where we can go. It's not just limitless horizon. We are operating within constraints. But even if you are finding your paths are blocked and there's no way forward and you're not getting responses, if you're committed to finding the fit between what you're seeking and then the person who will value your work, then you're going to find the place that's going to give you that momentum to move forward. And so, really approaching it as an experiment and understanding that unique value now is what allows you to find your way forward. It used to be like you're going to build the same skills as everybody else, and then people will just plug you in, and whoever has the best skills wins, right? Like you have to reach these certain credentials. More and more now, it's about identifying what makes you unique. And I've literally had a former boss come to me and say, I have a Bridget shaped hole in my organization. And we both knew what that meant, right? And then I could say, like, yes, I would love to come and do this role for you. So if you know what you're offering, 9 places might say no, thank you. And in my mind, that's like, phew, like thank goodness you have saved a lot of time and energy going someplace that didn't value what you offer. It's worth giving yourself the permission to do what you need to do, like pay the bills, certainly, but like find those places that value what you offer, because that is where you are going to feel the greatest sense of alignment between what you want from your work and what your work's giving you back.
And that culminates in a feeling. It's like the sweet spot. Wouldn't you say you know it when you know it?
It's that sense of flow, right? Like this idea that, my skills are equal to the task, and you almost kind of like lose yourself in the work a little bit, and you can tell when it's giving you energy versus taking it away.
That's the best. That's the absolute best. Bridget Thoreson, mycareerriver.com. Um, Anything I failed to ask, anything you'd like to add?
I really appreciate that question. I would just specifically say to anyone who is facing one of these moments where, despite everything, despite your best efforts, you're working so hard that nothing's turning up. Um, it's not forever. It is not forever. And even when it feels like you're failing at getting where you want to go, the fact that you are putting the effort in, you're doing what you need to do. Sometimes it just takes, and this has been hard for me to learn as well, sometimes it just takes a little time.
Patience, patience.
Patience. Yep.
Bridget, thank you so much for joining us on Keep It Local. Folks, when I put this out to our YouTube channel for Local Media Association of the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, whether it be YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the places, I'll have links to Bridget's work, to mycareerriver.com. And if you happen to leave comments or questions, and I see them, which I do look occasionally, I will make sure and get those to Bridget. Bridget, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.